The day Henry died, the world seemed to lose its color. The sky was gray, the wind carried a hollow chill, and even the birds that usually sang outside our window were silent. I sat in the corner of the hospital room, my hands gripping the blanket that had covered his frail body. For 30 years, he had been my husband, my companion, my anchor in the storms of life. And now, as the machines fell quiet and the nurses whispered condolences, I felt like a widow in a dream I wasn't ready to wake up from. My chest ached with a grief so heavy I thought it might crush me. But grief wasn't the only weight pressing on me that day. Because Henry had left me with more than sorrow. He had left me with a secret. One I hadn't dared touch while he was alive. But now it screamed at me louder than ever. I remembered the very first time he mentioned it, years ago. We had been driving home from visiting his brother, and as we passed a narrow dirt road on the edge of town, Henry had suddenly tightened his grip on the steering wheel. His eyes darted to the left and then back to the road ahead. I followed his gaze and saw a small cottage, half hidden behind overgrown trees. I had thought nothing of it, but Henry's voice came sharp, almost panicked. "Clara, listen to me carefully. That house, don't ever go near it. Do you understand?" I had laughed nervously at the time, thinking it was one of his odd jokes. But his face was so grave, so cold, that my laughter died on my lips. "Why not?" I asked. His answer was a firm, final, "because I said so." Promise me. I had promised, because that's what a wife does. And for years I kept that promise. Whenever I passed that road, I turned my head away, forcing myself not to look. Even when curiosity clawed at me, I held my tongue. Henry was a good husband. Hardworking, faithful in his way, and though stern, he always provided. I trusted him, or at least I wanted to. But the day he died, as I stood at his graveside with family around me, I felt the weight of that old promise pressing like a stone on my chest. What could possibly have been so important in that little house? Why had he forbidden me with such fear in his voice? And why had he never explained? In the days after the funeral, the house felt empty without him. Every corner echoed with his presence, yet also his absence. I couldn't cook without remembering how he used to sneak bites from the pan. I couldn't fold the laundry without thinking of the shirts he would complain I didn't starch enough. I couldn't sleep in our bed without feeling the cold space where his body once lay. But in that emptiness, I began to notice things I hadn't before. Henry's desk, usually so tidy, had one drawer slightly ajar. Inside, beneath stacks of old bills and church notes, I found a small brass key. My heart stopped the moment I saw it. The shape, the size. I knew it belonged to that little house. I sat there in the dark study, clutching the key as tears blurred my vision. My hands trembled because I felt like Henry was still there, watching me, warning me. His voice rang in my head, "Promise me." I whispered into the silence. "Henry, what were you hiding?" For nights I wrestled with myself. Should I respect his wishes, even in death? Or did I have the right, the need to know? The pull of curiosity grew stronger each day, mixed with a strange dread. I prayed, I wept, I tried to distract myself, but my thoughts always returned to that road, that house, that key. Finally, one evening, I couldn't bear it anymore. I drove down that narrow dirt road. My hands gripped the steering wheel the way Henry's once had, tight with nerves. The trees seemed to close in as I approached, their branches reaching like bony fingers. And then I saw it, the cottage. Small, weathered, but standing, its windows dark and unwelcoming. My heart pounded as I parked the car, the key heavy in my pocket. I stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes sounding far too loud in the stillness. For a long moment I just stood there, staring at the door. My breath came shallow, my palms sweaty. What if I regretted this forever? What if I discovered something I could never unsee? My fingers brushed the key and I took a step forward. But then, I froze. A memory crashed over me, sharp and sudden. Years ago, I had asked Henry if I could plant flowers along the path that led toward that dirt road. He had snapped at me so harshly I had flinched. "No, stay away from there, Clara. I mean it." His anger had been so unlike him that I'd never brought it up again. Now, standing before the house, I wondered what demons had driven that reaction. I stood at the door, key in hand, heart hammering. But just as I reached out, a sound startled me. Leaves rustling. I turned quickly and saw nothing, only the woods swaying in the cold breeze. Still, I felt eyes on me. With a gasp, I shoved the key back into my pocket and hurried back to the car. My chest heaved as I slammed the door shut, gripping the wheel like a lifeline. I couldn't do it. Not yet. That night, I dreamed of Henry. He was standing in front of the cottage, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Don't go in, Clara," he whispered. "It will break you." His voice was both a plea and a warning. When I tried to move closer, he faded like smoke, leaving me with a crushing emptiness. I woke with tears soaking my pillow, my chest aching as though I had truly lost him all over again. The next day, I tried to bury myself in chores, but my hands shook, and my mind drifted back to the house again and again. My neighbor Martha came by with a casserole, her kind eyes full of pity. She squeezed my hand and said, "I know you're grieving, Clara, but don't shut yourself away." Henry wouldn't want that. I wanted to laugh bitterly, to tell her that Henry wanted many things I couldn't understand. Instead, I forced a smile and thanked her, but the secret weighed heavier than her kindness could lift. By the third day, I couldn't eat. My stomach churned with dread and curiosity. The house felt colder, lonelier, as though even the walls knew the truth I hadn't yet uncovered. I sat in Henry's chair, clutching the key, whispering prayers I wasn't sure God could hear. Finally, I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll go." And so, the next morning, with the sky still heavy with clouds, I drove back to that cottage. My hands trembled as I walked the path. The air was so still it felt suffocating. At the door, I slid the key into the lock. The click echoed louder than thunder in my ears. My heart pounded as I slowly turned the knob, the door creaking open. But before I could step inside, something caught my eye. Through the dusty window, I saw movement, a shadow. My breath hitched. My mind screamed, "This house isn't empty." And in that moment, fear coursed through me so strong I nearly dropped the key. The shadow froze me in place. My breath came shallow, my fingers tightening around the doorknob as if it were the only thing tethering me to reality. The house was supposed to be abandoned. Henry never let me near it. He made it sound like no one had crossed its threshold for decades. And yet, there it was. A flicker, a movement, unmistakable. I stumbled back, my shoes crunching against gravel, my eyes wide on the dusty window. My heart thudded painfully, every instinct telling me to run. For a moment, I thought maybe it was my own reflection, distorted in the glass. But then I saw it again, this time more clearly, a figure shifting inside just beyond the curtain watching me. I gasped, the sound torn from my chest, and fled. I didn't even shut the door behind me. I just sprinted to the car, my trembling hands fumbling for the keys. The engine roared to life, and I sped down that dirt road as if the devil himself were chasing me. Back home, I collapsed on the couch, my whole body shaking. "It can't be," I whispered to myself. "It can't." I buried my face in my hands. Maybe grief had finally broken me. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there, shadows of my own despair. But deep down, I knew better. I hadn't imagined it. Someone, or something, was in that house. For days afterward, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I replayed every detail. The way the curtain shifted, the stillness afterward, the chilling certainty that I was being watched. The key lay on the kitchen table, taunting me. I should have gone to the police, but what would I say? That my late husband had forbidden me from entering a cottage, and now I thought I saw a ghost. They would pat my shoulder, chalk it up to grief, and send me home. One evening I confided in Martha. She was folding her arms tightly, her brows drawn together as I spoke. "Clara, are you sure?" she asked, her voice cautious. I nodded. "I saw someone. I know I did." She was silent for a long moment, then sighed. "There are stories about that place, you know. Whispers. Folks say Henry bought it years ago, but no one knows why. He never rented it, never used it. People thought maybe he had plans to fix it up, but he never did." I stared at her, my chest tightening. "Didn't you ever ask him?" "Oh, I did," she admitted. "But Henry had a way of shutting you down with just one look. So I never pressed." Her words sent a chill through me. Because she was right. Henry did have that look. A look that could silence you, even make you doubt yourself. I had lived under that shadow for 30 years, never questioning. But now, with him gone, the questions demanded answers. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump. Finally, I got up, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the key. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered. Tired, hollow-eyed, like a woman carrying more than she could bear. I whispered into the silence, "Lord, give me strength." And then I made my decision. The next morning, I drove back to the cottage. My heart pounded as I approached the door again, key in hand. I hesitated, glancing at the window. No shadow, no movement, just silence. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door. The old hinges groaned as it swung open, and a wave of stale, cold air hit me in the face. The inside was dim, the curtains drawn tight. Dust floated in the narrow streams of light breaking through. The floor creaked beneath my steps as I entered, my breath ragged, my pulse racing. The air smelled faintly of medicine and something else, something metallic. "Hello?" My voice cracked as it broke the silence. No answer. Is someone here? I stepped deeper into the room, my eyes adjusting. A table stood in the corner, covered neatly with a cloth, as though someone had been living here, or at least keeping it ready. My hand brushed against a chair and I felt warmth. I froze. Someone had been sitting there. Recently. Panic surged through me, and I spun around, ready to flee. But then I saw it, on the mantel above the fireplace. A photograph. My knees nearly buckled as I staggered forward. It was Henry. Younger, smiling, his arm wrapped around a woman I had never seen before. She was beautiful, her hair dark, her eyes bright. They looked happy, radiant even. My heart squeezed so tightly I thought it would burst. I clutched the frame with shaking hands, tears stinging my eyes. Who was she? Why had he kept this hidden? My breath caught again when I noticed something else. A second photograph tucked partly beneath the first. This one showed the woman holding a child, a little boy with Henry's eyes. My knees gave way, and I collapsed onto the floor, the photographs clutched against my chest. The room spun as 1,000 thoughts flooded my mind. Henry had another family, another life. And all these years, while I cooked his meals and prayed with him in church, he had hidden them here, in this house I was forbidden to enter. But before I could even process the betrayal, a floorboard creaked behind me. Slowly, trembling, I turned my head. In the dim light of the doorway stood a figure. My breath caught in my throat as my eyes focused. It wasn't Henry, of course not. But the resemblance was uncanny. The man standing there was younger, his face sharp, his expression hard. And his eyes, those same familiar eyes, stared down at me with a mix of anger and sorrow. "What are you doing here?" His voice was low, strained, and it sent shivers down my spine. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the photographs like a shield. My lips parted, but no words came. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear my own voice when I finally whispered, Who are you?" The man's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the photos in my hands. For a moment, his expression cracked, pain flickering across his features, before he turned cold again. "You shouldn't be here," he said, stepping closer. "He didn't want you to know." My body trembled, the walls closing in around me. The truth was unraveling before my very eyes, and I wasn't sure I could survive what came next. My knees felt weak as the man stepped closer, his footsteps heavy against the worn wooden floor. I gripped the photographs to my chest as if they were a lifeline, though they were the very thing cutting me open. My lips trembled as I whispered again, "Who are you?" His eyes burned into mine, and for a moment I saw Henry in them so clearly that I almost gasped. But there was something else too. Anger, resentment, and grief all tangled together. His jaw tightened before he finally spoke. "My name is Daniel." The name was unfamiliar, but it landed in my chest like a stone. He glanced at the photos in my hands and let out a bitter laugh, though it carried no humor. "So he never told you? Not once, in all those years?" My head shook slowly, confusion and dread swirling inside me. "Told me what?" My voice cracked like thin glass. Daniel's expression softened just slightly, as though pity had cracked through his armor. But then his gaze hardened again. "That woman in the picture, Margaret, she was my mother." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. And Henry was my father. The world tilted beneath me. My hand shot out, grasping the table to steady myself. No, I whispered, shaking my head violently. No, that's not possible, but it was. The resemblance in his face, the unmistakable eyes, the line of his jaw, it was all there. My Henry's blood flowed through this man standing before me, a man I had never known, never even heard of. Tears welled in my eyes as the betrayal crushed me. Why would he hide you? My voice trembled, desperate, pleading. Daniel's laugh was harsh, hollow, because I was the mistake he wanted to erase. He turned away, pacing the room, his hands clenched into fists. He built a whole life with you, a perfect life, while we lived here, in the shadows. His words hit me like blows. I thought back to the years I spent cooking, praying, loving Henry with all I had. The years I sat by his side in church, believing we were united, believing we were one. All the while another family had existed, tucked away like a shameful secret. But Margaret, I choked on the name. Who was she to him? Daniel turned back to me, his eyes dark with pain. She was his first love. Long before you, they were supposed to marry, but something happened. Her family disapproved, or maybe Henry was too proud. I don't know. All I know is he left her, and me. His voice cracked at the end, though he tried to mask it. I clutched the photograph tighter, my tears falling freely now. And yet he kept this place. He kept you close. Daniel shook his head. Close? No, he visited sometimes. Always in secret, always with guilt written on his face. He provided money, sure, but he never stayed. He never let the world know we existed. To him, we were a sin he could never wash away. My knees buckled, and I sank into the nearest chair, my whole body trembling. My Henry, my husband, my partner of 3 decades, had lived a double life. He had carried another woman in his heart, another child in his blood, while looking me in the eye and promising me faithfulness. Why are you here now? I whispered, unable to look up. Daniel's voice softened, though it still carried an edge. Because I thought maybe, after he died, maybe you should finally know the truth. You deserved to know what kind of man he really was. His words sliced me open, because they were the same words I had been afraid to face. What kind of man was Henry? Who had I really married? The silence between us grew heavy, broken only by the sound of my ragged breathing. Daniel's gaze softened, and for the first time, I saw the hurt child beneath the hardened man. The boy who had grown up in the shadows of my marriage. The boy who had waited for a father who never truly came. I hated him for years, Daniel confessed, his voice cracking. I hated him for leaving us, for pretending we didn't exist. But when I saw him with you, he paused, swallowing hard. He looked happy, and I realized maybe there just wasn't room in his heart for both lives. So he chose you. The words pierced me like a dagger. Chose me. Was I supposed to be grateful? Was I supposed to feel comforted that he had chosen me over them? All I felt was hollow, like the ground beneath me had caved in. I set the photographs gently on the table, my fingers trembling. I need time, I whispered. I need time to understand all of this. Daniel nodded slowly, his jaw tight. I'll give you that. But know this. Your Henry wasn't the man you thought he was, and the truth will keep unraveling, whether you're ready or not. With that, he turned and left, the door creaking shut behind him. I sat there in silence, staring at the photographs, my tears blurring them into shadows. For hours, I didn't move. I thought of our wedding day, the vows we made, the quiet evenings we spent together, and then I thought of Margaret, holding her child, waiting in this lonely cottage for a man who belonged to both of us, but fully to neither. When I finally stood, my legs shook. I wiped my eyes and forced myself to breathe. I thought maybe that was the end of it, that I had uncovered the darkest secret Henry had hidden. But deep down I knew better, because when I glanced at the mantel again, I noticed something I hadn't before, a small wooden box tucked into the shadows. With trembling hands, I pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a bundle of letters tied neatly with string. The handwriting was Henry's. My breath caught as I unfolded the first one, and as my eyes scanned the words, my whole world shifted again. The bundle of letters shook in my hands, as though the paper itself carried the weight of Henry's ghost. My fingers fumbled with the string before finally loosening it, and the stack tumbled into my lap. They smelled faintly of cedar and old ink, and I realized they had been preserved carefully, intentionally, as though he knew one day I would find them. The first letter trembled in my grip. I held it close to the flickering light of the lamp, my heart thundering so loudly I could hardly hear my own breath. "My dearest Margaret," it began. The name struck me like a slap. My throat tightened as I forced myself to keep reading. I don't know how to begin. Every time I write, I want to tear the page in half because I am a coward. A coward who chose safety over love, respectability over truth. I know I will never be forgiven. Not by you, not by the boy, not even by myself. But I can't help reaching out, even if these words never leave this house. My hand pressed against my chest as the words bled into me. He had written to her, to Margaret, pouring out the guilt he had never shown me. He spoke of love and shame, of a life split in two. I turned to the next letter, my eyes hungry despite the ache in my chest. "You were my first home, Margaret. You and Daniel. I see his face in my dreams. I wonder if he hates me yet, or if he still waits for me to walk through that door like a proper father. God help me, I am weak. I chose Clara because I couldn't bear the weight of our history. She gave me a new beginning, a clean slate. But you are the part of me I buried alive," I gasped, the words blurring through my tears. A clean slate. That was all I had been to him? A chance to rewrite his story, while burying the old one in a shallow grave? I read on, letter after letter, each one a confession of a man divided. He spoke of longing, of regret, of the way he watched Daniel from afar, but never dared to stay. He spoke of his love for Margaret, of the guilt that corroded him, and, cruelest of all, he spoke of me, in ways that twisted like a knife. Clara is good. She is kind. She does not deserve the lies I tell, but I can never tell her the truth, for it would break her, and if I lose her, I lose the only piece of peace I have managed to hold on to. The words blurred again as I dropped the letter onto the table. I covered my face with my hands, my sobs shaking the room. Peace. That was what I had been to him. Not love, not passion. Peace. A quiet harbor where he could hide from his sins. And yet, buried among the letters, I found something else. A single envelope with my name on it. My fingers froze, my breath catching in my throat. The ink was faded, but the loops of his handwriting were unmistakable. Clara. With trembling hands, I tore it open. "My Clara," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. And if you have found these letters, then you know the truth I never had the courage to tell you. I beg of you, hate me if you must, but please do not hate yourself. You were never second to anyone. You were my salvation. You were the reason I smiled in the morning. The reason I kept going when the weight of my sins crushed me. You were light in a life I had darkened with my own mistakes." I clutched the letter to my chest, my tears dripping onto the ink. My heart didn't know whether to shatter or to cling to those words. Salvation. Light. Could I believe them when he had written so differently to Margaret? Or were both true in their own twisted way? The storm of grief and betrayal raged inside me until my hands went numb. But then, at the very end of the letter, his words changed everything again. "Clara, there is something more. Something I never told anyone, not even Margaret. There is a reason for all of this. A reason for my choices. Look beneath the floorboards in the study. There you will find what I could never speak aloud." I froze, the paper trembling in my hands. The floorboards. My eyes darted across the room to the small study door, half hidden by shadows. My stomach twisted with dread, yet my feet carried me toward it. The room smelled of dust and time, its shelves lined with old books and ledgers. I knelt on the floor, my hands searching the wooden planks until I found one that creaked differently beneath my touch. My nails scraped against the edges until it lifted, revealing a small compartment. Inside lay a box, worn and heavy. My hands shook as I lifted it out, setting it on the desk. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. I thought of everything I had already uncovered, every secret that had shattered my image of Henry. Did I really want to know more? But curiosity and fear burned hotter than hesitation. I unclasped the lid. Inside was a stack of documents, photographs, and something that made my heart stop. A birth certificate. My fingers trembled as I lifted it. The name at the top was Daniel's. But when my eyes scanned the lines, my breath caught in my throat. Under father, it read Henry Whitmore. Under mother, it read, not Margaret, it was another name. A woman I had never heard of before. My hand flew to my mouth as the room spun. Margaret wasn't his mother? Then who was? Why had Daniel believed she was? Why had Henry let him believe it? I stared down at the document, the questions piling faster than I could breathe. And then I noticed another envelope at the bottom of the box, sealed and marked with a single word, truth. I reached for it with trembling hands, my breath shallow, my heart pounding louder than the storm outside. And as I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside, the words staring back at me made me drop to my knees in shock. The envelope marked truth felt heavier than stone in my hands. I stared at it for a long time, my breath shallow, my fingers trembling so badly that I could hardly break the seal. But finally, with a desperate gasp, I tore it open and pulled out the folded sheets inside. Henry's handwriting stared back at me. Familiar, steady, the same loops and curves that had signed birthday cards, love notes, and grocery lists for decades. Yet now those lines carried the weight of a confession that could break me entirely. My dearest Clara, it began. I swallowed hard, my eyes scanning quickly though each word pierced like a blade. If you are reading this, then I am no longer by your side, and I have run out of time to tell you face to face. You deserve every truth I denied you, though I fear it will destroy the memory of the man you loved. Still, you must know everything, because you were the only person who ever gave me true grace. My chest ached as I clutched the paper tighter. My heart wanted to reject it all, to tear the letter apart and cling to the version of Henry I had built for 30 years. But my eyes betrayed me. They kept reading. Clara, Daniel is my son, but Margaret is not his mother. That was the lie I let him believe because it was easier than the real story. Margaret was his caretaker, his shield. The truth is that Daniel's mother was my sister. I staggered back, the letter slipping from my fingers before I snatched it up again, my hands shaking. My voice cracked into the silence. His sister? My eyes raced over the page, my mind spinning as Henry's words spilled out. Her name was Eleanor, my younger sister. She was troubled, Clara, sick in ways we did not understand then. She was fragile, reckless, drawn to men who used her and left her. One night she came home broken, pregnant, abandoned. Our family wanted to cast her out, to shame her, but I couldn't bear it. I promised I would protect her and her child. And when Daniel was born, she disappeared. She couldn't do it. She left him in my arms and never came back. I pressed the letter to my lips, my tears soaking into the paper. Daniel, not Henry's shameful mistake with another woman, not the child of an affair, but his nephew. His sister's abandoned son. But Henry hadn't told Daniel that. He had let the boy grow up believing he was unwanted, believing he was the secret child of a father who lived a double life. He had let Margaret, a woman who once loved him, raise that child under falsehoods. I turned back to the letter, my breath catching with every word. I know I should have told Daniel the truth, but I thought I was sparing him. I thought, perhaps if he believed he was my son, he would feel more anchored than if he knew he had been abandoned by his real mother. Margaret agreed to the lie out of love for the boy. But lies are poison, Clara. They seep into everything, and now I fear the poison has spread too far. My chest heaved, torn between fury and pity. Fury at Henry for destroying lives with his silence, and pity for the child who had grown up in that silence. The letter continued, each word dragging me deeper into the abyss. I kept the house because it was Daniel's home. It was the one place where he could still find me, if he wanted to. I visited when I could, but every visit was filled with guilt. Every time I looked into his eyes, I saw my failure staring back at me. I wanted to tell him the truth 1,000 times, but the words never came. I told myself I was protecting you, Clara, protecting our marriage, protecting his heart. But in the end, I protected no one. The ink blurred as my tears streamed faster. I whispered into the empty room, "Why, Henry? Why didn't you tell us?" The final lines of the letter shattered me completely. If I could ask one last thing of you, my Clara, It would be this: tell Daniel the truth I could not. Tell him he was never a mistake. Tell him he was wanted. And forgive me if you can. I was a coward, but I loved you more than life itself. I dropped to my knees, clutching the letter against my chest as sobs racked my body. All these years, decades of lies, layers upon layers of hidden truths, and it came down to this: a boy who had grown up unloved, a woman who had been deceived, and a man who had let fear dictate everything. When the sobs finally slowed, I knew what I had to do. Daniel deserved to know. The next morning I returned to the house. The air outside was heavy with mist, the kind that clings to your skin and seeps into your bones. My heart pounded as I knocked on the door. Daniel answered, his expression guarded, his eyes still burning with the pain of a lifetime. "Why are you here?" I held out the letter with trembling hands. "Because you deserve to know the truth." Suspicion flickered across his face, but he stepped aside and let me in. We sat at the same table where my world had unraveled before, and I slid the letter toward him. His hand shook as he opened it, his eyes scanning the words. At first his jaw tightened, his chest heaved, and I thought he might rip it to shreds. But then his face softened, his lips parting in disbelief. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were glassy with tears. Not my father?" His voice broke. "All these years, and he wasn't even my father." I reached across the table, my hand hovering before gently resting over his. "No, Daniel, but you weren't unwanted. You weren't a mistake. You were abandoned, yes, but not by Henry, by his sister, your mother." He let out a sound between a sob and a laugh, shaking his head. "He let me hate him. He let me believe I was nothing more than his dirty secret. Why didn't he tell me?" I swallowed hard, my own tears spilling again. "Because he was a coward. But he loved you, Daniel. He truly did, even if he didn't show it the way you deserved." Daniel buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. For the first time, I saw not the hardened man, but the boy beneath. The boy who had waited by a window for a father who never came. We sat in silence for a long time, the letter between us like a fragile bridge. Finally, he whispered, "What am I supposed to do with this? How do I live with this truth now?" I squeezed his hand gently. "You live knowing you were wanted. You live knowing you weren't a mistake. And maybe you find a way to forgive him. Not for him, but for yourself." Daniel's eyes met mine, filled with a pain I could not erase, but also, for the first time, a flicker of release. As I left the house, the sun broke faintly through the mist, painting the fields with pale light. I clutched Henry's last letter in my hands, my heart torn but strangely lighter. I had lost the man I thought I knew. But I had gained the truth, and maybe, just maybe, I had given Daniel the one thing Henry never could: clarity. Yet as I turned back for one last glance at the house, a chill swept over me. Because in the shadows of the upstairs window, I thought I saw a figure watching, a woman's face, pale and sorrowful, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, and I realized perhaps Eleanor's ghost still lingered, waiting for the forgiveness she never found in life.